Bob's going to lead us in the prayers. Astrid in the Australian. Artie? Sally's going to read something. And then we have a treat with us. Maraiya is going to start off with a beautiful song. And then she'll also end it. But in between, Bobby Street is going to talk to us about this and that. Oh, he's right there. And 30, 40 minutes. Hope you can all be here. Zip it. I have to say that with Brooklyn toughness. So, Bob, take your glasses off.
Oh, Prodigar, the preserver and protector of all. You are without beginning and without end, non-dual, beyond comparison, and none can measure you. You are without color, without expression, without form, and without attributes. You are unlimited and unfathomable, beyond imagination and conception, eternal and imperishable. You are indivisible, and none can see you but with eyes divine. You always were, you always are, and you always will be. You are everywhere. You are in everything. You are also beyond everywhere and beyond everything. You are in the firmament and in the depths. You are manifest and unmanifest, on all planes and beyond all planes. You are in the three worlds and also beyond the three worlds. You are imperceptible and independent. You are the Creator, the Lord of Lords, the knower of all minds and hearts. You are omnipotent and omnipresent. You are knowledge infinite, power infinite, bliss infinite. You are the ocean of knowledge, all-knowing, infinitely knowing, the knower of the past, the present, and the future, and you are knowledge itself. You are all merciful and eternally benevolent. You are the soul of souls, the one with infinite attributes. You are the Trinity of truth, knowledge, and bliss. You are the source of truth, the ocean of love. You are the Ancient One, the highest of the high. You are Prabhu and Parameshwar. You are the beyond God and beyond God also. You are Par Brahma, Allah, Allahi, Yastan, Mahura Mazda, and God the Beloved. You are named Isad, the only one worthy of worship. We repent, O God, most merciful, for all our sins, for every thought that was false or unjust or unclean, for every word spoken that ought not to have been spoken, for every deed done that ought not to have been done. We repent most especially for every lustful thought and every lustful action, for every lie, for all hypocrisy, for every promise given but not fulfilled, and for all slander and backbiting. Most especially also, we repent for every action that has brought ruin to others, every word and deed that has given others pain, and for every wish that pain should befall others. In your unbounded mercy, we ask you to forgive us, O God, for all these sins committed by us, and to forgive us for our constant failures to think and speak and act according to your will. Amen. Beloved God, help us all to love you more and more, and more and more, and still yet more, till we become worthy of union with you, and help us all to hold fast to Baba's Dhamman until the very end. Avtar Mer Baba Ki Jai, Altar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Altar Meher Baba Ki Jai. You want to pray the song?
O glorious, eternal, ancient one, pure faces of bright transcendental sun, lighten this dark world and the tears I weep. My heart, Meher, I give to you to keep. Creator, yet creationless you are, truth and truth's body, divine avatar, who through compassion the three worlds maintains. Destroy this ignorance that life sustains. These five lights are the whirling spokes of breath of the world's wheel that bears me unto death. Unless you, who are infinitely kind, break the wheels of which is conditioned mind. This incense is my love, these fruits my heart, which to please you I have shaped from my heart. Accept them as you would a simple flower that has no use beyond its shining hour. You are myself, I sing to you in praise, and beg your love to bear me through the days, till you, the ever-living perfect one, illume my darkness with your shining sun. Altar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Altar Meher Baba Ki Jai. Altar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Deva.
Got it.
We're going to have a short reading, and I forget the fellow's last name, and once or twice a month he emails certain people, and it's called In His Love. John Meyer.
Up in Vermont.
Up. Thank you, Jim. Yeah. I forgot all of that. And so the other day, this is what he sent, and I thought, wow, Sally's going to read it.
Do not think about your ego. Do not think about your weaknesses. Entrust everything to me. Become dedicated to me and love me. If you love me, what is going to happen? You won't have to kick out the rest of the things.
I fit right into that. Anyway, we now have Maraiya.
Chair there?
Now, do you want a microphone? No? Okay. So go ahead. You want a chair or?
I'll take a chair.
Okay. That's okay for you? Okay.
Don't need a mic, just for a song. Besides, you guys are supposed to help me with this song, and it's very easy. You'll pick it up.
Try mine. You can still do that? I got the mic.
Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba. I don't hear you, Meher Baba. Avatar Meher Baba, Meher Baba, Avatar Meher Baba. And all I want to do is sing a song for you. I don't claim to have the perfect words to describe you, and all I long to be is to be able to see your beauty in everyone and everything surrounding me. But it's in your silence that I feel your love
It's in your silence that I'm sure of. There's nothing but you. Nothing to do but to love you. Your turn, Meher Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba. 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 And all I want to do is stand here before you, dance this illusion away to the rhythm of you. And all I long to be is be laughing till I cry, oh, drowned in tears of joy. Oh, what a happy way to die, but it's in your silence that I feel your love. It's in your silence that I'm sure of. There's nothing but you. Nothing to do but to hold on to you. Meher Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba. Meher Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba. Meher Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba. Avatar, Meher Baba. Meher Baba. Meher Baba. Meher Baba.
So this brings a thought which has nothing to do with what we're talking about. But anyway, in reading, Baba says, listen to my silence now, for when I break it, you will never hear it again. Ponder it. I've been doing it for a while and I've come up with nothing. And with that, I'm going to introduce Bobby Street. And he's going to talk to us, and he's going to start off with a prayer. We do not have to stand, and he will explain where this prayer comes from. Bobby, you're on.
Yes. Okay, I'm going to begin by a prayer that was given to me by Adi Keirani about the last year of his life in 1979. And this prayer came to him when he didn't like to see him meditating, but he sat in a chair every day for half an hour, and he said, I like to say that I'm reflecting. He would think about this, he said, meditation is too regular in its action. But he said, today I might think about Baba, tomorrow I might think about something else, and one day this prayer came to him, and he got up after the meditation, the relaxation, and he just wrote it down, and it goes like this. Beloved Meher Baba, bless us all, so that in the stress and the strain of our daily life and the fluctuations of our mind, we learn to relax wholly and wholeheartedly and float on the ocean of your love. and call for your breath of joy, your breeze of compassion, and your wind of strength to flood into every fiber of our body, every corner of our mind, and every space of our heart, to cleanse us of all our impurity, and make us worthy of your love, of your service, of your obedience, and most of all, your pleasure. Amen.
Amen.
So, I will begin my story in on my, I heard about Baba in 1967. I read the Everything and the Nothing, and I immediately accepted Baba. And I didn't know if he was alive or dead, or I grew up in a small place, Aberdeen, Washington, and nobody there knew about him except one person gave me that book, The Everything and Nothing, and I would hear this and that about him in Seattle, but I couldn't find any other books or anything. And I decided to go to New York in 1971, and I went with a friend to New York, hitchhiked across the U.S., and was turned away in London because I had not enough money. He said, "How much money do you have?" I said, "Money's not a problem for me." "No, how much do you have?" I said, don't worry about it. Then money doesn't matter. "How much do you have in your pocket right now?" I said, $50. "See that door over there? Go there." So I was locked up with my friend overnight and sent back to U.S. And I was in New York for about 6 months. I had a job there, and my friend and I were sitting in Ratner's restaurant. It's a vegetarian restaurant in the East Village. And my friend said, "Isn't that John Lennon and Yoko Ono sitting over there?" And I said, yes, it is. So I had a Baba card in my pocket that I'd been carrying around for a few days. It was an Indian Baba card, and with a picture of Baba, and it just said at the bottom, "Avatar Meher Baba," and the back was blank. So I liked that card because I'd never seen the picture of Baba. It was an Indian card. So I went over to John's table and I said, "I'd like you to have this," and I handed him the card, and I went back to my table. And about 5 minutes later, a man came to me that was sitting with him. There was John and Yoko and a man and a woman, and the man turned out to be Jerry Rubin. And he said, he handed me the card back, and I looked at it, and on Baba's face there was a Hitler mustache in a black felt pen. And on the back it said, "Every man is a potential Hitler, every woman is a potential Hitler's mother." So I said, well, at least I must say something to John that he shouldn't draw a mustache on Baba's picture. So I went over and I sat down to him. I said, "I don't understand why you've drawn this mustache on Baba's picture, and what's written on the back." And he said, "I didn't do it, Yoko did it."
Oh, Yoko.
And so she repeated, "Every man is a potential Hitler, every woman is a potential Hitler's mother." I said, "But he's not a man, he's God in human form." And then John said to me, "What is God?" And I told him, "God is love." And he said, "Love is love." And I just got up and folded my hands like this and went back to my table. And then about 5 minutes later, the man that had given me the card, he came over to my table. He said, "John doesn't want you to be offended by anything he said, and he'd like to have the card back." So I gave him the card back. He probably didn't want me to say, well, Yoko did it. And there was a story in the Rolling Stone about 2 weeks later that exclusive interview with John Lennon and Yoko Ono. And so I opened it up. It's like the Rolling Stone type of magazine. And there was that card picture was there with the Hitler mustache, and there was no mention of the card in the article, how it got there, why it was there, or anything. It said Avatar Mayor Baba, and the mustache was drawn on. So about 10 years after his death, Yoko Ono was giving an interview from her apartment, and she was sitting there, and behind her there was a shelf of books, and there was God Speaks, everything, and discourses and so forth. And I don't know whose books they were, whether they were hers or John's or Sean's book. I don't know who they were, but John Myjak, who was a resident of Maribod, she wrote something in the newspaper, and it was Baba quote, and it was mispronounced. I mean, read. It was a few words were wrong and this and that, and so John Myjak said, "I'll send her this correct quote, word for word," and he sent her an email, and she responded back that, "I like what Mayor Baba says, and thank you very much for sending me the email." So I don't know how far it's true. I haven't seen her, but it sounds like that she's amenable to Mayor Baba. And I told Eriko, when I got to Maribod, I told Eriko about this story of meeting John Lennon, and I said I was in Ratner's. He said, "Oh, my cousin owns Ratner's." So I said, and there was a dancer that was visiting Maribod. Her name is Sally Pearson, and she said my brother was one of his lawyers for John Lennon. He was from Princeton, and he defended him against his deportation. So, and Yoko Ono sends him a gift every summer, every Christmas to him. So it's a small world. And so that was before I went to India. In 1971, I met John, and then in 71, I got to India, and the twins were getting married. Rustam and Soral, Baba's nephews, were getting married, and I spent 4 months in India at that time, and then I went back, and then I got a job from James Cox, who was giving money to finance a building in the Pilgrim Center. So I had a job in South India for about a year and a half as a garment inspector. And during that job, I had 6 attacks of migraine headaches. I never had any health problems in my life, but these headaches were so severe they lasted 3 days and 3 nights. And if it hadn't been for Baba, I would have committed suicide. People do with that kind of pain. And so I gave up the job after a year and a half, and I came to spend the rest of the half year in Ahmednagar. And Adi had a heart attack. Adi K. Arani had a heart attack at that time, and he was in bed, and he wasn't fully active. And he was the one that was taking care of all the pilgrims at that time. There's no trust involvement with the pilgrims. And so I said, he asked me if I would help in his office. I said, yes, I will. So I sat there, and while I was there, I had, in the night, I had another headache coming on. And I woke up and he said, what's wrong? I said, I have an unbearable headache. He said, I'll give you something. And he went into this box, he brought out these little pills in the vials, little white pills, and I had seen him give that to people for upset stomach and sunstroke and insect bite. And I thought to myself, there's no way this is going to do anything for this headache. But it's not going to hurt me, let him try. So he said, open your mouth. He asked me a few questions. I opened your mouth. I put the pills in my mouth. And in 30 seconds, my headache was 90% better. And I woke up in the morning. This was about 3 in the morning. Then I woke up in the morning. He says, how's your headache? I said, it's gone. He said, okay, now you go to Padre. He'll give you medicine so you won't get it back. And I took medicine from him for 15 days, and I haven't ever had a headache again. So Adi came to me, he said, do you want to, I was going back to U.S., my visa, and he said, do you want to continue on here helping me? I said, thought to myself, well, I'm going back to no job in New York and very little money, and well, why not stay here? So I just thought, yeah, there's nothing better to do. So I stayed there for 3 years, and after he gave me the remedy for the headache, about 6 months later, this was 1975, he said, you study these biochemic remedies. He was giving these 12 cell salts. And I said, oh no, I'm not a scientist. I didn't do well in science. He said, what do you think, I'm a scientist? I've been doing this 40 years. I said, well, whatever he says, I don't want to become a doctor. The thought of giving medicines and this and that and studying it. So I didn't do it. And 6 months later, he handed me 2 books. He said, go through these, you'll find it very interesting and helpful to so many other people as well. So I thought, well, at least I have to read them because he gave them to me. So I started reading. I said, this is simple principle, simple. And it's a simple idea, but it requires a master to become proficient in the science. And so I started studying it, and this is in 1975, and Adi had come here to Myrtle Beach, and he was giving a speech. And so he wasn't there, and a woman came with her child, 5 years old, holding him like this, and said, we want Baba's medicine, we want Baba's medicine. And the child had an abdomen about this big, it just bulged out like that. And I said, I didn't know what it was. I thought of gas or something. It looked like a starving child from Africa. And I said, well, I'm not a doctor. I've only been studying 6 months, and the doctor will be here. When is he coming? I said, 2 months. She said, there's no time. This child's been in the hospital a week, and he had this huge abdomen. They drained it and went down, and it came back in 3 days. And they told me there's nothing more that can be done. He's not affected by the treatment, and we don't know the cure. And he'll die in 2 months to 6 months maximum. So get your things put in order. So she came. She wanted Baba's medicine. I can't treat. I'm not a doctor. We want Baba's medicine. We want Baba's medicine. And I said, well, I'll take his name and I'll give the medicine, But if your child gets worse or if he dies, I'm not responsible. They all say he's going to die. So just give Bob his medicine. So I gave 1 dose every week for 3 months, different, increasing in potency. And he recovered. And he was completely well. And so 30 years later, I asked Suman, who was Audie's cook, you know that little boy that I treated, he had a huge abdomen, and she says, little boy, he's 35 years old. He's in Bombay and he's married and has 3 children. I said, are they sick? No. Is he sick? No. So that gave me courage and inspiration to study. I thought to myself, if someone like myself that doesn't know at that time anything about pathology or anatomy, I didn't know where the liver was, on the right or the left. And I said, but this medicine cured him, and the doctors, the allopathic doctors in the hospital all said, there's nothing more we can do, he's going to die. So, but he got cured. So I said, it must be a really great science if someone like myself can cure this disease. So I got interested in that in 1 year, and then I started studying homeopathy with Padre. And that was a great experience studying with him. He was a very acute prescriber. Now, let me tell you a story about him. He and Erico and myself were sitting outside his office one day, and in those days there was no ending a 10-year drought, and there was no trees or no growth, or you could see across the street this way, that way, and we heard this racing motorcycle and a crash. And so Padre said, come on, let's go. So we got up and we walked down to what is now the health center, Dottie's farm, the experimental farm. It was about 100 yards away, and a motorcycle with 2 people on it collided with a carriage, and the 2 people on the motorcycle knocked off the motorcycle onto the pavement about 20 feet away, and the horse carriage was knocked into the ditch, and it was in the ditch down. So Padre, there just happened to be a rickshaw coming by, and at that time there was hardly any rickshaws. And he sent those 2 people that on the motorcycle to the hospital, and then he went down, and the horse was in the ditch at the side of the road, and the rigging in the front, it was a wooden board piece had broken off and got into the horse's shoulder, and it was bleeding a little bit. So Padre went down. He was very adept. He just pulled it out. It was about that long, but when he pulled it out, his blood started spurting, a lot of blood, and he got the horse cart driver up and on his way, and he said, I'll take the horse back and treat him. So he took him back and he tied him up by the Rahuri cabin, but he lost a lot of blood, and he was weak. The next day he was weaker, and the next day weaker, and by the 4th day he was on the ground just resting. And I thought to myself, well, Padre kept giving him medicine every day. I said, well, he's not going to make it, because there was a rattle in his chest, a death rattle. And I thought, well, Padre tried his best, but I couldn't understand why he
continued to give him remedies. But on the 4th day, the horse looked up, and the 5th day he was a little stronger. The 6th day he was up and walking around, and he recovered. He was still limping, but he recovered. And so I was amazed. I said, well, Padre, your medicine has acted. Yes, I know. So that horse came, this was a dealer that Padre knew. He had a shop in Nugger, and he would come from a village beyond Erangel. He would come into Ahmednagar every week to get his supplies. And so we heard this whipping of the horse and man shouting, go, come on. And he was by the duty. And the horse just bolted like this. So the man just stopped whipping him, and he came into Padre's room where he had been treated, and so Padre just laughed. He got up and gave him pills out of his placebo, out of his bottle, plain pills. And that horse stopped every day for 2 years, and to Padre for medicine, because he was thankful about the treatment. And even the day that Padre died, the horse came a couple days later after he died and looked around for him, and then he never came again. Let's see. Anyway, I studied with Adi for 3 years, biochemic remedies, and I studied with Padre for 7 years. And I met Dr. Wadia from Bombay in 1970, about 77 I met him. And he was a homeopath, but Baba asked him, what's your profession? He met Baba in 1948 there in Mehrabad, and Baba asked him, what is your profession? He said, well, Baba, I'm a physician, but now I practice homeopathy. And Baba gestured. Homeopathy is a perfect science. It can bring the dead back to life, but it requires a master of that science. And Wadi was very happy to hear it from Baba, because he had given up allopathic. He came to homeopathy treating his uncle with allopathic medicines for asthma, and this medicine, that medicine, everything. Nothing worked. So his colleague said to him, why don't you try homeopathy? He said, homeopathy? Well, he thought to himself, well, I've tried everything else, I gotta try it. He tried homeopathy on him, he cured his uncle, and he was amazed. And from that time on, he threw all his allopathic medicines out and practiced homeopathy for 40, 50 years. And his son was practicing also. And I would go to Bombay the father invited me to come see his patients if I wanted. So I would come and sit with him for 3 years. Once a month every year, I would come for a month or a month and a half, and he said, well, why don't you study with my son? He's across the street in my old clinic. So I went across the street, and he used to see 150 patients a day. I said, how do you see so many? He said, well, they tell me they're better. How are you? 25% better, 50% better. I'm all better. He would just give him the medicine again and send him out to the man in the next room and make the medicine. They'd be off in 5 minutes. Wow. And he practiced 6 days a week and saw many people. And I learned a new method from him of giving medicine every day for high potencies repeatedly. And most homeopaths give one dose of medicine and you wait and wait, because Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy in 1800, has written 6 books, 6 editions of the Organon. And every homeopath today practices the 5th edition. But he wrote the 6th edition, but then he died, and his wife didn't have it published until she gave it a 1921 in Germany. So all the homeopaths hadn't seen it, and they were stuck to practicing. And in the 6th edition, he came out with this new method of different potencies and this and that, but they're only made to 30 potency. And the homeopaths were giving high potencies, 10M, 50M, CM. That means 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 potency. And but one dose, because Hahnemann in his 5th edition said, don't repeat the remedy until it wears out, and then you repeat the remedy. It takes time. It works, but it takes time. It takes time, and you have to give the right medicine. So I learned from Wadia this method of reproducing, but I was skeptical. I wouldn't start giving the medicines until I saw improvement from his patients. And there was a woman that I treated with for rheumatism. She had for 10 years, and she was limping, and I gave her medicine. I waited 6 weeks. There was no change. And I gave 1,000 potency, and then so I gave her 10,000 potency, 1 dose, and I waited another 6 weeks. How are you? I'm not any better. So anyway, I went off to Wadia, and I saw a woman there that had almost similar arthritis. It was worse in the cold and worse in the rain, and better by heat and better by moving. And he gave her Rustox 10M 3 times a day, and called her after a month. How are you? I'm 25% better. And then he gave her another doses to take 3 times a day for a month, and she was 50% better in another month. So I said, there's something to this, And I saw one patient, he came in, he said, this doctor has saved my life. I said, he had just come for cough and cold, flu or something, but he said, this doctor has saved my life. He said, 10 years ago I had a scooter accident, and I damaged my hip, and I got something that's called avascular necrosis of the hip, and the only solution was a hip replacement, and they were new in India. And the doctor said, you'll have a hip replacement, but it'll only last 5 years. You need another replacement in 5 years. He said, I'm only 25 years old, and I don't want a hip replacement every 5 years. So he just rested in bed for 1 year. And he was in terrible pain. Moving. It hurt when he moved, when he was still, and it hurt when he moved. And Dr. Wadia gave him Rustox CM, 100,000, 3 times a day for 6 months. He's 50% better, and gave him 1 million potency, 3 times a day for 6 months, and he was fine. And his hip joint, the x-ray showed, was pitted and decalcified. It was necrosing, I mean it was being destroyed. And it recalcified back to what it was. And he didn't have a limp or anything. That was 10 years ago. So then I started repeating it, and I've seen 75,000 patients in the years I've been practicing. I'm in my 48th year of homeopathy, and it's amazing what the results are. And I just followed his method, and he doesn't go to meetings or anything. He said, no, they just fight among each other and they argue with me. I don't want to go. So very few people know this method. And they just stick to the 5th edition, and they say they're classical homeopaths. And but they're not real classical because the 6th edition said give once, twice, 3 or 4 times a day for weeks or months or years together to cure. And the 6th edition, these new potencies that are only made up to 30, that the homeopaths say, well, 30 potency won't cure anything chronic like that. So they stick to what they know, to single dose, single dose, single dose. But I faced a lot of criticism in the beginning when I studied in America also, and they said, no, you can't do that, you can't do that. I said, why not? I've been doing it for years and years. And they said, but you'll get aggravations. I said, no, there's no aggravation. I said, maybe 1%. And that's in a hypersensitive patient. No, but you'll get proving, so the medicine will start reproducing itself. I said, no, doesn't happen. Maybe 1 patient out of 100 gets, and you stop the medicine, it goes away. So there's no aggravation. So it's been very successful, my treatment of homeopathy. And you must have read in the last day or so, they've changed the rules at Maraiya, and non-Indian pilgrims and residents will not be able to go to Lower Maraiya, where the clinic is. So I won't be able to practice there, and or at the health center. So I'm thinking about what to do.
Come here. Yeah.
We're lining up.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen. It's in Baba's hands. And I've given over $50,000 worth of medicine to the clinic. It's a beautiful clinic in Nagar now that I built up over the years. And there's an Indian doctor there now, Baba loved Dr. Joshi, that practices homeopathy. She went to school in Bombay. And she switched over to my method of giving every day. She gives high potency, 10M, 50 MCM. And it's going well there. But
Bobby, is the method the same of finding the right remedy? It's just the potency and the frequency that's different?
yes, I have to find the right remedy.
Yeah.
But I've had good teaching from Adi and Padri and Dr. Wadia, and now I study with George Vatulkas in Greece, who is a world-famous homeopath, and he's starting now to switch to what I'm saying. He says, well, I said, have you used the LM potencies, which was in the 6th edition? He said, well, I use them, but they're only 30 potencies. I don't think they're strong enough. But I explained to him, yes, they are. I said, you give one patient 1 dose of 10,000 potency, and you give the second patient LM12 3 times a day for a month. And then you call both patients after a month. The patient that's taken 10 NAM potency has received 100,000 shakings of the medicine. And the patient that's taken LM12 3 times a day has received 108,000 shakings. Tulkas. Well, so he's giving more patients LMs now. They're only available up to 30 potency, but for organ damage they're good, and this and that, and so things are changing slowly over to a new way. Homeopathy will advance. Baba supported it, and his clinic was started by Dr. Gunny. He said, Baba, why don't we start it? The year 1925, there was an allopathic free dispensary, and after 1 year, they had to close down. They ran out of money. And so Dr. Gunny, who was a homeopath, said, well, why don't we have homeopathic? And Baba said, all right, you start something on me. And there was 4 people. And he said, well, we have no place to practice. Baba said, you practice in the lagoon cabin. And so they started there. There was Baba's brother Adi, there was Dr. Gunny, Padri, and Dr. Kali, Murli Kali, who was a trained homeopath. So they started in 1936. And it's the same dispensary has been going since 1936, every day.
And the lagoon cabin, what town?
The Jokti or where?
Where? The cabin,
Which
lagoon
cabin?
cabin is where?
Where was it?
In India?
Which cabin did they start?
Where did they
You'll have to
practice?
speak up.
Where did they practice the 4?
In Baba's Jopti, and then after, when the New Life came, Padri was at Mehrabad, and he practiced in the Mandali Hall in his room there. So it shifted in 1948 to his room, and then I practiced 10 years in the health center and 10 years at Mehrabad, and like I say, it's been a wonderful experience treating 75,000 people
Yes.
free. And the thing that's different about that clinic is mostly free clinics are for the poor people. But the poor come, the middle class come, and the rich come to the clinic because they've seen good results, and it's going on. Now, let me think of some stories that might interest you.
I just want to say one thing before you get another story. Because you treated me when I was at Maribel. And when Bobby would treat, it was in Padre's room.
Yes?
And then you would go through the little problems, looking at your chart, doing that. And then you would look at Baba's little photo of Baba. And then you'd do a sincere prayer.
Yes.
And then you would say, help is on the way.
Yes.
And it was so sincere the way that was said. I felt like I'm going to be healthy.
Yes,
And
yes.
you did find the cure.
Yes.
Took a while.
Well, I'll tell you, in 1990, I had to leave Mehrabad because I ran out of money. And for 17 years I had been there on $5,000 I earned from James Cox. It lasted 17 years. So my mother and father came to Mehrabad to see what I was doing and when I going back to U.S. And my father's an architect, and Ted was having problems with the samadhi. It was leaking from contraction and expansion and so forth. And I said, well, you know, my father will be here in a week, and he's an architect that practiced 45 years in Aberdeen, Washington, a rainy city. 75, 80 inches of rain a year, and he knows how to design something that won't leak, and he knows how to fix leaks also. And Ted is from Yale, but he never practiced architecture. He had a degree, but he hasn't practiced. And so he said, your father, and you could see the look on his face, and you could read his mind. He said, what is your father going to tell me? He's from a little tiny place in Aberdeen, Washington. But Aberdeen had the largest sawmill in the world at the turn of the century. And he didn't know that my father went to MIT and went back to, he was born in Aberdeen, my mother was born in Aberdeen, and he lived his life in Aberdeen. So he talked to Ted and recommended a product that they got from Atlanta, and it fixed the leak in the samadhi. Wow. And he grew up, he went back to his house in Aberdeen, where I grew up, and he had built it himself. It took him 4 years to build. He was a master craftsman, woodworker, plumber, wiring, everything he did. And when he got back, the basement started leaking. He said, "Oh, I couldn't figure it out." And he did this and that, and then he blamed it on the Roto-Rooter people. They must have damaged the pipe and this and that, and he could never fix a leak. He died, and I told Money, and Money just laughed. He said, "Well, he fixed the leak for Baba, and Baba gave him the leak there." He fixed everything. He was a master craftsman. He couldn't fix the leak.
Bobby, could you tell us some times with Mansari?
Okay. First, I'll tell you about my father's letter that he wrote to me about a year later after he visited Maraiya. And my mother and father both had wonderful experiences, and he never liked the philosophy. He said, "I don't like to think about things there's no answer to." And so we would not talk about it, and I would argue, say, "I don't want to argue," and he'd get up and leave. And he wrote a letter to me after a year he'd been to Maraiya, and it said, "Mayor Baba's love will never fail you. Never leave him." So let me tell you about Mansari. She and I were good friends. I would eat at her kitchen every Saturday, and she would tell me stories and so forth. And she called me Bob Maharaj, and Pindu called me Babuji, and she was very close to me and friendly with me. I dressed very plain. She liked that, and then John Majak and I saw that in the samadhi, where you bow down, it was getting rough. There was concrete with pieces of marble in it, and when I bowed down, it would be rough in the forehead. It was worn down about that far, and this is only since 1969. They said if it's this far down now, it'll be worse. So John Majak and I suggested that they put granite in it, and because it's harder than marble. And we went to Pune and we showed him a sample of it, and Rano approved it, and we put it in. Ted put it in, and Mansari was very upset with me. She said, "How could you do that? You know, Padre said put the marble in there, and you how could you take it out?" And I said, "Well, it was wearing and even the pilgrims were against it, some of them, and they said to me, 'Why did you change it? Why did you change?' I said it was all rough, and when you bowed down, it hurt on the forehead." She said, "You can't suffer that much? Baba suffered so much for you, and you can't suffer that much?" So anyway, Mansari was very upset with me, and she wouldn't speak to me for 2 years. But then she warmed up. After 2 years, she forgot about it, and she said, "Well, okay." But I was friend with Jalu and Gulu too. I come up there, give them medicine, and I would take medicine before I go because they weren't good cooks, and they gave me a dessert and had 100 dead ants in it. I said, "Oh, all these ants are all dead." He said, "Oh, yeah, oh, they're very good for eyes." Anyway, I ate it, and and they were there when my mother and father came, and is showing about 10 other pilgrims, and myself and my mother and father around the shell cage in the end there, where the must was treated by Baba. He was caged up, and so Gulu was a talk, and she said to me, "Why are you leaving?" She said about a week before they came. I said, "Oh, I've run out of money." She said, "Your father doesn't have money?" I said, "Yes, he has money." You realize, I've said too much. And she said, when he came, she said, "Why aren't you giving him money? You have a lot of money and you're not giving him. And he has to go back." My father's humiliated in front of her. He said, "Well, it's his decision. He wants to come back, and he has to go back. He has no money. You have a lot of money, but you're not giving." And so my father, he said, "Well..." So I left for 15 years, and I came back in 2005 to Mehrabad again. And let me think. Oh, another funny story. When I first met Adi, when I came in 1971, he said, "Who are you? Where are you? Why are you? Oh, you don't know these simple questions?" I just was stunned. He said, and then he laughed and laughed. He said, laughed at me, and it was very difficult to leave after 3 years of work in his office. Leave Adi. He died 2 years later, but I left for Mehrabad to study homeopathy with Padri. But I would visit him in Ahmednagar, and he'd be reading a homeopathic book, and I said, "Oh, you're reading homeopathy?" He said, "Better late than never." I'm studying, so on my next birth I'll be a homeopath. So he was very, very jovial, very kind, and he gave wonderful talks in the Mehrabad, in the Ahmednagar Center. And every Thursday he'd give a talk, and Jack Small was there helping him. And one day he forgot to bring the water from him. He said, "You go get, where's that evil Jack Small? You bring me water." And everybody laughed, and then he said, "You know why Indians are all the time late? Because it's a terrible talent. It's a trait of Indians to be not on time, not on time." Baba was very particular about time, but Indians are not. He said, "You know why? Because we're so immersed in the eternal now that we don't pay any attention to time." And he said, "No, I'm just joking." He said, "This is an explanation," he said, "but we should be on time." And
what did you do the 15 years that you were back in the States? Did you practice homeopathy?
Yes, I practiced homeopathy with Jack Caraco in Los Angeles for 5 years. And then I went to New York, and I practiced 10 years in New York, homeopathy. And
what happened to your big giant Chevrolet car that was so big?
The Chevrolet car. A Chevrolet car?
You had a prized Chevrolet car, 1960 Chevrolet car with a V8 engine. What happened to it?
what happened in...
What happened to your Chevy?
What happened to your Chevrolet car that you loved so much?
Yes,
it was really big. It was as big as this room.
Yeah.
Really?
I had a large Chevrolet in New York, and there was my father's old Impala 454, and then I had it rebuilt and everything, and I gave it to a friend in New York when I left.
Oh, good, okay.
Yes.
You first.
Charlie Mana's friend. Charlie Mana was a friend of mine also that I met in India in 1971.
Oh, yeah. Remember
Bobby.
Bob.
Okay. Let's see. Part of my wonderful experience there was every week I would go to Mehrabad, or Mirzad, and hear Mani and Erich and Meras give talks and so forth and so forth. I heard many things there. Now I'll tell you about Padre's death, because I was the only person there when he died. Because it was a Saturday and everybody had gone to Mirzad to hear Mani and Erich and Mera. And we had been discussing tea in the morning. I had tea with him every morning. When I was studying homeopathy and staying at Adi's, I'd bicycle out and be there at 6 in the morning and go up the hill in the RT. So I parked my bicycle and was walking up the hill, toward the hill, and the Padre said, "Have you had your tea?" I said, "No. Adi is busy in the morning meditating or reflecting, whatever he calls it." And he said, "Your tea's here." So I went to Padre's kitchen and I had a good mug of tea, and then the next day I came out to Mehrabad and I parked my bicycle by the tree of the Rahuri cabin, and Padre said, "Where are you going? Your tea's here." And he pointed to his kitchen, and it lasted 7 years that I had tea with him in the morning. And we were discussing a letter to buy homeopathic medicines from Germany. But the pharmacies in India, they would normally get orders from Germany, but they weren't installing, not saying, and I didn't know what was wrong. But what was wrong was that in the meantime, the German manufacturers were collaborating with the Indian manufacturers to set up manufacture in India. So they weren't sending German medicines anymore.
Oh.
And so I told Padre, "This is the problem." And he said, "Well, Don Stevens is a good source of businessman, and we'll have him write to them in India, in Germany, and tell them, and they'll send, maybe." So we were discussing the letter, and so the morning that everybody went to Mehrabad, and Padre and I are sitting outside his room, and he's sitting there with his feet up on the windowsill and leaning back in his chair, and I was forming a letter, and it was a letter to be from Padre. So he said, "No, change that. No, change that." And so at the end of the letter I said, "How do you want to close it?" He said, "Sincerely yours." And I said, "You want to read it back before I type it up one more time?" And I didn't hear anything. I looked up, and his face was all pink and red, and this vein was purple and distended, and he wasn't in any pain, but he wasn't saying anything. I said, Padre. He didn't say anything. So I went into his room and I gave him some homeo medicine, and I said, Padre, and he just was like this, and it wasn't moving. So then I said, well, he must have had a stroke, and he's not going to recover. So I leaned into his ear. I said, Mayor Baba. So peaceful, and it was like somebody getting up and opening a new door to another room and walking in another room. And his body was put in the Rahuri cabin that night, and Monty came in the morning and said, "No one's home there," because the spirit came up to his head and just went out. It didn't even look like Padre after that. And the atmosphere lasted in Maraiya about a day. And they said, some Baba lovers said it was like being at Guru Prasad with Baba. That feeling was there. So that was the end of my talk.
Yeah, that
There's another opportunity to sing Baba's name. And this is a song about the center. Home, where the ocean meets the sky, a paradise for you and I, where my whole being comes alive before such beauty. Oh, there's no place I'd rather be than with you under the stars, dancing in your loving arms along the myrtles by the sea, where everything is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Where everyone is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Oh, where time's hiding behind the trees and worries vanish in the breeze, where I can give myself to you so completely. Oh, no greater place I'd rather be than with you under the stars, resting in infinity along the myrtles by the sea, where everything is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Where everyone is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Home, where the brightest moon on the lake rises and falls in every lover's eye, where the joy in every face I see opens my heart and sets it free. Home, no sweeter place I'd rather be than with you under the stars, savoring eternity along the myrtles by the sea, where everything is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Where everyone is singing. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba. Ba 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 ba.
usually close the meeting with 2 words, Mayor Baba. But today, I just felt a little something different, and I'd like to close it with, Mayor Baba, thank you for Maraiya.